anyone feeling that one side ought to stop bombing and the other side ought to continue it. I would hope that all this talk about stopping the bombing would have some reference to the bombing that they did on Independence Day when General Westmoreland and them the day before yesterday intended to go out to a ceremony they were having, and they tried to bomb the place where he was supposed to sit. I would hope that some of this stopping the bombing agitation would be directed to the folks that throw the bombs at our embassies in Saigon. We've never bombed the North Vietnamese embassy. We have never bombed their population. Sure, we try to hit a military target, a petroleum target, or an electric plant, but here they come in and try to bomb the seats where our ambassador, where the head of state, where our general commanding forces, and if they want us to stop bombing, we've got to see what they're willing to stop. And we'll be glad to carefully consider anyone's proposals that represent two-way streets. We don't want to talk about just half of it, though.
Mr. President, in view of the North Korean attack on an American patrol in Korea, could you assess for us the situation at the 38th parallel today?
We have had some increased incidents there of late. We are filing a very strong protest for this totally unjustified murder of 6 of our men. We will make the strongest representations. We would hope that it is not indicative of any continued desire on the part of the North Koreans to violate the terms of the armistice, and certainly the United States of America does not plan to violate the terms of that armistice, and we hope they won't either. Ms. Means?
Mr. President, does the cancellation of your big campaign trip mean that you do not intend to do anything to help Democratic candidates before election, such as one little speech in Texas or maybe a campaign TV pep talk before election?
First, we don't have any plans. So when you don't have plans, you don't cancel plans. We get invited to come to most of the states. In the last 6 weeks, we've been invited to 47 of the states by the candidates for governor, the Senate, or the Congress. We've been invited on non-political invitations to the other 3 states, I might say. But we have not accepted those invitations. We do contact the local people who extend them. We do investigate in some instances going there, and we do express the hope that we can go. But until it's firm, until we know we can, we do not say we accept and schedule. And the people of this country ought to know that all these canceled plans primarily involve the imagination of people who phrase sentences and write columns and have to report what they hope or what they imagine. We have no plans for any political speeches between now and the election. We know no requirement that we forego them. I just don't think they're necessary. And I have had a very active year, and I would hope I could spend a relatively quiet weekend and go vote on Tuesday morning. I hope every American will go vote on Tuesday morning, and if they do, I have not the slightest doubt but what their good judgment will prevail and the best interests of our country will be served. But I have no plans to make any speeches. I have not canceled any plans that I had agreed to, although I did express the hope early in the year that I could visit as many states as possible. And I visited approximately 30 this year, which sets some kind of a record itself. If I do schedule anything between now and next Tuesday, I would feel that I'm perfectly at liberty to do so, and if I did, I'd give you due and adequate notice. Mr. Rather.
Could you give us your estimate of whether the inflationary pressures on the economy are easing up or increasing at the present time?
Well, there's been a very healthy movement toward price stability in recent weeks. on the economic front. I wouldn't say in the newspapers or the radio, television, but the statistics would indicate that. The Department of Labor this morning released the wholesale price index in October. From February through October, that's roughly 10 months, we've had only a gain of 0.8%. And the index released shows that we had a decline of 0.6% from September, and it brought the average level of prices back below any month since June. So I think that that's a very healthy movement. I want to reiterate that while we have had some gains, some increases in prices, that's been brought about by increases in wages that we thought were very desirable in the low earnings group. The lowest paid people in this country got some increases. The hospital workers, the bus drivers, the lower paid group. And that did bring up prices some. You can't do it without it. But prices have increased less in the 6 years of the Kennedy-Johnson administration, with Vietnam on and all the pressures that it brings. They've increased less than they did the previous 6 years in the Eisenhower administration. But the wages have increased much more, and you have more money to pay the increased prices with than you did in the previous 6 years. So I don't think anybody can make much out of that. All you got to do is say, well, now, if you're worried about inflation, you're an expert on it, because you had a much better record in that field than we had. Mr. Spivak.
Mr. President, as you know, an aura of mystery has developed around the assassination of President Kennedy. And I'm thinking of 2 or 3 books that were written, and some lawyers and others casting doubts on the works of the Warren Commission. Now, the case, as I understand it, was based on the alleged mysterious disappearance of photos, x-rays, and so forth. Now the Justice Department discloses that the Kennedy family had these documents. They've now been turned over to the National Archives. I wonder why that was not disclosed before, and also why this material is still not available to competent non-government investigators.
Well, first, I think it's been available to the Warren Commission any time it wanted to see it. Second, I think it's available to any official body now. Third, I think that every American can understand the reasons why we wouldn't want to have the garments and the records and everything paraded out in every sewing circle in the country to be exploited and used without serving any good or official purpose. And as my understanding, all this took place while I was away, but it's my understanding that most of this has been over in the archives, stored all the time. It's always been available to the Warren Commission, to the government, to the Justice Department, the FBI, the late beloved President's brother was Attorney General during the period the Warren Commission was studying this thing, and I certainly would think he'd have a very thorough interest in seeing that the truth was made evident, and I believe he did have. And I think that he and the FBI and the entire government made available everything that the Commission wanted. I think they made a very thorough study. I know of no evidence that would in any way cause any reasonable person to have a doubt about the Warren Commission. But if there is any evidence and it's brought forth, I'm sure that the Commission and the appropriate authorities will take action that may be justified. Miss McClendon?
Sir, I know that you've been interested in doing something for the Spanish-speaking people of the country, but would you fill us in on your plan somewhat?
Well, I've been interested in seeing that the Spanish-speaking people of the country were treated equally ever since I've been in public life. I have had very excellent cooperation from them. I've appointed a good many of them to very high places in the government. I have done what I could to improve their economic conditions by passage of legislation I think would be helpful. I've tried to do what I could to provide equality of opportunity in employment, in education, in health, and in other government programs. And as long as I am in this office, I will try to see that all Americans are treated equally. And I have a very special fondness for the Spanish Americans because I grew up with them. I learned to speak their language as a child. I went to school with them. I taught them. And I've been getting them to vote for me for 30 years. Miss Bell?
Last week, Senator Barry Goldwater predicted that Ronald Reagan would win the governor's seat in California by either a minor or a major landslide. Would you care to give us your assessment of the governor's race in that state?
I would just express the hope that there's been no improvement in Mr. Senator Goldwater's judgment since his predictions of '64. And when I see these predictions about elections, I would commend to all of your attention before you use the people's airwaves and the advertisers' columns that you review their predictions 2 years ago and 4 years ago and see just how accurate they were. I did that the other day. I went back to the predictions of how many seats they were going to gain in '64. Instead of gaining, they lost. How many seats they were going to gain in '62, and what was going to happen in '60. And I just hope that the predictions of Senator Goldwater and Senator Dirksen and the ex-Vice President Nixon are as accurate this year as they were then. I found them very undependable as prophets, although they're fine individuals. Mr. Eaton.
Sir, can you evaluate the prospects for a tax increase in view of the price developments that you announced earlier?
We have the appropriation bills being evaluated at the moment. There are 1,250 separate appropriations. They will cover 2,500 various items, fields. We're going to withhold as many of those appropriations as we feel that we can in the national interest. We hope to announce those sometime between now and the end of the month or the early part of next month. During that same time, Mr. McNamara has got his fine-tooth comb and reviewing every request of the military to see how much we can forego of the requests they've made. When we get that request, as we hope to before the Congress gets back here, we'll then look at the revenue figure. And there are indications now that we've had a great increase in revenue. And if we did not have to have a substantial supplemental, I think we will have to have a substantial supplemental. I don't think we need any tax increase at all. But our tax increase will be determined largely by how much I can cut out of the appropriations the Congress made and how much our men at the fighting front will require in the way of equipment and support for the rest of this year. I will know that sometime the early part of next month, and as soon as I know it, I will make appropriate studies and recommendations that will be available for the Congress when they come back.
Mr. President.
Mr. Roberts.
Mr. President, since the Manila meeting, there's been some uncertainty as to how to interpret the withdrawal terms that were included in the communique. Yesterday, for example, Mr. Nixon said that it appeared that you had proposed, or the seven powers had proposed, getting out in a way that would leave South Vietnam to the mercy of the Viet Cong. Could you comment on that?
I would be glad to comment on the communique. I do not want to get in a debate on a foreign policy meeting in Manila with a chronic campaigner like Mr. Nixon. It's his problem to find fault with his country.